The people who have the least are usually the ones who give the most. Naomi Carter kept staring at the crumpled $10 bill in her hand, while the old diner clock clicked past 11:40 p.m. outside. Rain washed silver across the empty streets of downtown Chicago. Inside Rosie's diner, the smell of burnt coffee and onion rings clung to the air like a memory nobody wanted anymore. Naomi slipped the bill carefully into her apron pocket and exhaled slowly. $10. That was all she had left until Friday. $10 to buy gas for her 15-year-old Honda. $10 to keep the heat running one more night in her tiny apartment. $10 standing between her and another phone call from her landlord. "You heading out?" Rosie asked from behind the register. Naomi forced a smile. Almost. Her feet ached after the double shift. Her curls were tied back under a faded black scarf, and the sleeves of her uniform smelled faintly like dish soap and coffee grounds. She grabbed a damp towel and wiped the counter one last time while thunder rolled outside the windows. Then the diner door opened. Cold wind rushed in first. A little boy stepped inside holding the hand of a tall man in a soaked dark coat. The kid looked around 8 years old. Pale. Exhausted. His small sneakers squeaked against the tile floor. The father looked worse somehow. Not poor. Not drunk. Just empty. Like somebody who hadn't slept in weeks. "Kitchen's closing in 10, Rosie muttered. But Naomi was already grabbing 2 menus. "Booth 7 is clean," she said softly. The man nodded once. "Thank you." His voice sounded rough, careful. Like every word cost energy. Naomi watched them sit near the fogged-up window. The little boy curled deeper into his hoodie, while rainwater dripped from the man's sleeves onto the table. "Can we get chicken soup?" the boy asked quietly. "And fries." The father smiled faintly at him. "Yeah, buddy." Naomi poured them water first. The boy drank immediately like he hadn't had anything warm all day. "Long night?" Naomi asked gently. The man looked up for the first time. Gray eyes. Sharp. Tired beyond words. Something like that. She nodded without asking more. Some people carried silence the same way others carried luggage. A few minutes later, Naomi brought the soup. Steam curled into the air between them. The little boy smiled the second he tasted it. And for the first time that night, the father looked human again. Not rich. Not important. Just somebody's dad. Naomi turned away before they noticed her watching. Near midnight, the diner emptied completely. Rain hammered harder against the glass. Rosie counted receipts near the register, while Naomi stacked mugs into plastic tubs. Then she heard it. Beep. Pause. Beep. "I'm sorry, sir," Rosie said awkwardly. "Your card declined." Silence. Naomi glanced up. The little boy immediately stared down at the table. The father reached for the card again. "Try one more time." Beep. Declined. The man's jaw tightened slightly. Not angry. Embarrassed. Worse somehow. He rubbed his forehead and let out a breath that sounded broken. "I must have locked the account." Rosie shifted uncomfortably. "It's all right. Happens sometimes." But everybody could feel it. That heavy moment when pride cracks quietly in public. Naomi looked toward booth 7 again. The boy whispered, "Dad, it's okay." The father couldn't even look at him. And suddenly Naomi felt that $10 bill inside her apron pocket like it weighed 100 pounds. Naomi lowered her eyes before anybody could notice the change in her face. She knew that silence. The kind that wrapped around a person when they were trying not to fall apart in front of strangers. Rosie cleared her throat awkwardly behind the register. "Sir, maybe the system is acting up tonight." But everybody knew it was not the system. The man reached for his wallet again anyway, fingers stiff from the cold rain. Expensive leather. Empty expression. The little boy looked smaller somehow now, sitting under the yellow diner lights with a spoon still in his hand. "Dad," he whispered carefully. "I am full anyway." The father forced a smile that hurt to look at. "You barely touched your fries, buddy." Naomi stared at the coffee pot in her hand while her heart pulled in 2 directions at once. $10. She could already see herself sitting in her car tomorrow morning praying the gas light stayed off long enough to get to work. She could already hear her landlord's voicemail asking about rent again. But then she looked back at the booth. The boy was pretending not to be hungry so his father would not feel embarrassed. And suddenly the $10 stopped feeling like survival money. It started feeling like a test. Naomi quietly set the coffee pot down and walked toward the register before she could change her mind. Rosie leaned closer immediately. "Please tell me you are not thinking what I think you are thinking." Naomi slipped the wrinkled $10 bill from her apron pocket. "Run it with the rest of my tips." Rosie blinked. "Naomi? Please." Rosie lowered her voice. "Baby, you need gas money." Naomi glanced toward booth 7 again. The father was speaking softly to his son now, trying to make the moment feel normal, trying to protect the little dignity he had left. Naomi swallowed hard. "I know." Rosie looked at her for a long second before taking the bill slowly. The register drawer opened with a metallic click. $10 disappeared into the till. Just like that, Naomi picked up the receipt and changed the total before carrying it back toward the table. The little boy looked up first. "Are we okay?" Naomi smiled gently and placed the check beside the empty soup bowl. Across the front, she had written one word in blue pen. "Paid." The father frowned slightly. "There must be a mistake." "No mistake," Naomi said softly. "Kitchen closes soon. You two should get home before the storm gets worse." His eyes lifted to hers then. Really lifted, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Naomi noticed details she missed before. The expensive watch under his sleeve. The sharp line of exhaustion around his mouth. The wedding ring that was no longer there but had clearly lived on his hand for years. "I cannot let you do that," he said quietly. "You did not." She gave the little boy an extra container of fries to go. "Good night, sweetheart." The boy smiled for the first time since walking in. "Thank you, Miss Naomi." Something inside her chest cracked a little at the sound of her name in his tiny voice. She nodded quickly and turned away before the father could say anything else. But she still felt his eyes following her all the way back to the counter. Outside, thunder rolled low across the city. Rain slid down the diner windows in silver lines. And for the first time all night, the man in booth 7 looked less like somebody powerful, and more like somebody trying very hard not to break. The diner finally emptied a little after midnight. Neon lights buzzed softly above the windows while Rosie flipped chairs upside down onto tables one by one. Naomi moved slowly behind the counter, rinsing coffee mugs beneath warm water that smelled faintly like soap and burnt espresso. Outside, rain still poured across the streets of Chicago in endless silver waves. Booth 7 remained quiet. The little boy had fallen asleep against the window, curled beneath his father's coat with one small hand still resting near the empty soup bowl. Naomi pretended not to notice the man watching her from across the diner. "You should wake him," Rosie whispered while counting receipts. "Storm is getting worse." Naomi nodded slightly, but before she could walk over, the man stood carefully, lifting the sleeping boy into his arms with surprising gentleness. The child rested his head against his father's shoulder immediately, trusting him without effort. Naomi felt something tighten quietly in her chest. The father approached the counter slowly, one hand supporting the little boy while the other reached into his coat pocket. "At least let me pay you back," he said softly. Naomi shook her head. "It is fine." "It is not." His voice stayed calm, but she could hear the weight behind it now. "Pride." Gratitude, exhaustion, all tangled together. He pulled out a business card, then paused halfway like he changed his mind. Naomi noticed it for only a second before he slipped it back into his coat. Thick white cardstock, embossed lettering. Expensive. Definitely not somebody ordinary. "You do not even know me," he said quietly. Naomi gave a tired little smile while drying her hands with a towel. "Maybe that is why it matters." The words seemed to hit him harder than she expected. He looked down for a second, almost stunned, like nobody had spoken to him honestly in a very long time. Rain thundered against the windows again. Somewhere outside, headlights flashed across the glass. Then a black SUV rolled slowly past the diner. Naomi barely noticed it, but the man did. His jaw tightened instantly. The SUV stopped briefly near the curb before continuing down the block. "Dad?" The little boy murmured sleepily against his shoulder. "It is okay, buddy," the man whispered. Naomi studied him quietly now. The expensive watch, the polished shoes soaked with rainwater, the careful way he scanned the street before touching the door. Wealth recognized danger differently than ordinary people did. "You should get home," Naomi said gently. "Your son needs rest." For the first time all night, the man almost smiled. "You sound like his mother." The softness in his voice disappeared as quickly as it came. Naomi immediately noticed the change in his eyes after saying it. Grief, deep and old. He adjusted the sleeping child higher against his shoulder. "Thank you, Naomi." Hearing her name in his voice felt strangely personal. She nodded once. "Drive safe." He opened the diner door, and cold wind rushed inside again. Rain sprayed across the floor tiles. Naomi watched him disappear into the storm, carrying the little boy close against his chest. Then she noticed something near the booth. A folded paper left behind beside the empty water glass. Naomi walked over slowly and picked it up. It was a child's drawing done in blue crayon. A tiny stick figure holding hands with a taller figure under a crooked yellow sun. Across the top, messy handwriting read, "Me and Dad." Naomi stared at it quietly while thunder rolled outside. Then headlights flashed through the diner windows once more. The same black SUV had returned. This time it stayed parked across the street with its engine running. And somewhere behind the dark tinted glass, somebody was still watching the diner. Naomi stood frozen beside booth 7 for several seconds after the diner door closed behind them. Rain blurred the streetlights outside into soft gold smears across the glass, while the black SUV remained parked silently across the road. Its headlights stayed off now. Only the faint glow of the dashboard lit the inside. Rosie noticed it too. "You know them?" she asked quietly while wiping down the counter. Naomi shook her head slowly. "No, but something about the entire night felt strange now. Heavy. Like a moment she was supposed to remember later." She folded the child's drawing carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket before grabbing her coat from the back room. The diner lights dimmed one by one behind her as Rosie locked the front door. "You sure you are okay getting home?" Rosie asked. Naomi forced a small smile. "I have survived worse than rain." Rosie handed her a paper bag before she could leave. "Turkey sandwich. Leftover pie too." Naomi sighed softly. "Rosie, take it." Rosie pointed toward the street. "And put gas in your car tomorrow before it dies in the middle of Lake Shore Drive." Naomi laughed quietly for the first time all night. "Yes, ma'am." She stepped outside into cold air that smelled like wet pavement and winter coming early. Rain tapped softly against her scarf while she hurried toward the old Honda parked half a block away. The black SUV still sat across the street. She avoided looking directly at it. People with cars like that usually lived in a different universe than waitresses carrying leftover pie home after midnight. Naomi unlocked her car and climbed inside quickly. The engine coughed twice before starting. "Come on," she whispered to the dashboard. The gas light blinked immediately. Of course. She rested her forehead briefly against the steering wheel while rain drummed above her. $10 gone. 2 days until payday. One overdue electric bill sitting on her kitchen counter. Her phone buzzed suddenly in the cup holder. "Landlord." Naomi stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. A voicemail notification appeared seconds later. She did not listen to it. Not yet. Across the street, the black SUV finally moved. Slowly, smoothly, passed beside her car without stopping. Naomi caught only a brief glimpse through the tinted back window. The man from booth 7 sat inside with the sleeping child beside him. For one strange second, his eyes met hers, through the rain-covered glass. Then the SUV disappeared into the storm. Naomi released a breath she did not realize she had been holding. 20 minutes later, she pulled into the parking lot of her apartment building on the south side. Half the exterior lights were out again. The elevator had been broken for 3 weeks, so she climbed 4 flights of narrow stairs carrying her shoes in one hand to keep from waking neighbors. Apartment 4B smelled faintly like old radiator heat and laundry detergent. Tiny, quiet, lonely. Naomi dropped her keys onto the kitchen counter and finally listened to the voicemail. Miss Carter, this is your final notice regarding rent. She closed her eyes immediately. If payment is not received by Friday morning, we will have to move forward with the process. Silence filled the apartment afterward except for distant thunder outside. Naomi sat slowly on the edge of her couch and stared toward the rain streaking down her window. Then she remembered the folded drawing in her apron pocket. She pulled it out carefully and looked at it again beneath the dim kitchen light. Me and Dad. Something about the crooked little blue letters made her chest ache unexpectedly. She smiled softly despite herself. Somewhere out there tonight, a little boy was warm and fed. Maybe that was enough. Naomi placed the drawing gently beside her lamp and turned off the kitchen light. But down on the street below, hidden behind falling rain and dark glass, another black SUV quietly rolled to a stop across from her apartment building. Naomi woke before sunrise to the sound of pipes knocking somewhere inside the walls of the building. For a moment she forgot everything. Then she saw the child's drawing still sitting beside the lamp, and the memory of the rainy diner night returned quietly all at once. She sat up slowly beneath a thin blanket and checked her phone. 6:32 in the morning. 3 missed calls from her landlord. 1 overdue payment reminder from the electric company. And a weather alert warning about flooding on Lakeshore Drive. Naomi rubbed her eyes and forced herself out of bed anyway. Life did not pause just because somebody was tired. The apartment floor felt cold beneath her feet as she moved toward the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed weakly. Inside sat half a gallon of milk, mustard, and the leftover pie Rosie had packed for her. Naomi poured herself coffee from yesterday's pot and stared out the window while steam curled around her face. The black SUV was gone now. Maybe she imagined the entire thing. Maybe rich people always traveled in dark cars and she was just exhausted enough to turn strangers into mysteries. Still, she could not stop thinking about the man's eyes when he looked at her after she paid the bill. Not pride, not arrogance. Something sadder than that. Her phone buzzed again. Rosie this time. Naomi answered immediately. Please tell me you are not calling to say I am late. Rosie sounded breathless. Baby, where are you? Naomi frowned. Home. Why? Silence crackled through the phone for half a second. Then Rosie lowered her voice. Do not panic when you get here. Naomi sat upright instantly. Rosie. There are like 6 black SUVs parked outside the diner. Naomi blinked slowly. What? And men in suits. Rosie sounded completely overwhelmed now. Real suits. Fancy ones. One of them asked for you by name. Naomi's stomach tightened. Asked what? Nothing. They just keep standing around like they are waiting for somebody important. Naomi looked down at the drawing beside her lamp again. Me and Dad. Suddenly the apartment felt too quiet. Did I accidentally help the mafia? Rosie laughed nervously. Baby, if the mafia starts tipping at this diner, I am finally fixing the ice machine. Naomi could not help smiling a little. But the feeling disappeared quickly. I will head over. She dressed fast in her faded diner uniform and wrapped her scarf around her curls before hurrying downstairs. Rain still misted lightly across the city, cold enough to sting her face. Her Honda started after 3 painful attempts. The gas light blinked angrily the entire drive. 20 minutes later, Naomi turned onto the diner street and nearly hit the brakes. Rosie had not exaggerated. Black SUVs lined the curb outside Rosie's diner like something out of a political movie. Men in tailored coats stood beneath umbrellas near the entrance speaking quietly into earpieces. Customers walking past slowed down just to stare. Naomi parked across the street with her heartbeat climbing higher every second. What in the world? She whispered. Then one of the suited men noticed her car immediately. He touched the earpiece near his collar and said something quietly. Within seconds, the diner door opened, and the man from booth 7 stepped outside wearing a charcoal coat worth more than Naomi's entire apartment. The rain touched his shoulders lightly while the city seemed to pause around him. But it was not the expensive coat that made Naomi freeze. It was the little boy beside him smiling the second he saw her. "Dad?" Ethan whispered excitedly, tugging the man's sleeve. "That is her." Naomi stayed frozen beside her car while cold rain gathered along the sleeves of her uniform. Ethan waved excitedly from beneath a large black umbrella, completely unaware that half the street had stopped to stare at the line of SUVs outside the diner. Rosie stood behind the front window with both hands pressed dramatically against the glass like she was witnessing a celebrity scandal in real time. Naomi swallowed hard and slowly crossed the street. The man from booth 7 stepped forward immediately. In daylight, he looked even more expensive somehow. The charcoal coat fit perfectly. Silver threaded lightly through his dark hair at the temples. Every movement around him carried the quiet gravity of somebody used to being listened to. Yet his eyes looked exactly the same as the night before. Tired, guarded, human. Ethan smiled up at her. "I told Dad you would come." Naomi blinked. "You did. I said nice people always show up." The words hit harder than they should have. Naomi forced a gentle smile. "Good morning, Ethan." The little boy proudly held out the folded blue crayon drawing from the diner. "You forgot this." Naomi laughed softly under her breath. "I thought maybe you left it for me." Ethan looked toward his father. "Can she keep it?" The man finally spoke. "That depends." His voice remained calm and low. "Do you mind if we talk for a moment?" Naomi glanced nervously toward the row of black vehicles again. Men in suits stood nearby pretending not to watch them while absolutely watching them. "I have work," she said quietly. "Of course." He nodded once. "Then let me make this simple." One of the suited men approached carrying a small dark box. Naomi instinctively stepped back. "What is this?" "Not a gift," the man said immediately, noticing her discomfort. "Just something important." He took the box himself before opening it carefully. Inside, beneath black velvet, sat the wrinkled $10 bill she had given Rosie the night before. Naomi stared at it in complete confusion. "Why do you have that?" The man looked at her steadily. "Because it mattered." Rain tapped softly against the umbrellas overhead while the street around them faded strangely quiet. Naomi glanced again at the $10 bill resting beneath the glass. She almost laughed. "It was just dinner." "No," he said gently. "It was dignity." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Ethan tugged lightly on his father's sleeve. "Tell her." The man looked down briefly before meeting Naomi's eyes again. "My name is William Whitmore." Naomi frowned slightly. The name sounded familiar. Then she noticed the reaction from people nearby. A couple walking past slowed instantly. One man across the street pulled out his phone. Rosie nearly dropped an entire tray of coffee mugs inside the diner. Naomi's breath caught softly. William Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Technologies. Billionaire. One of the richest men in Illinois. She had seen his face before on magazine covers near grocery checkout lines. But last night he had looked nothing like the polished man from those photographs. Last night he had just looked lost. Naomi stared at him for several silent seconds. "You are kidding." William gave the faintest smile. "I wish I was." Ethan grinned proudly beside him. "Dad is famous." Naomi looked down at her worn diner shoes, suddenly feeling embarrassed for reasons she could not explain. "I did not know who you were. That is exactly why I came back." The rain softened around them while the city slowly woke beneath gray morning clouds. Then William reached inside his coat and pulled out a white envelope. Thick, heavy. He held it toward her carefully. "Last night you gave my son warmth when you had almost nothing yourself." Naomi hesitated without taking it. "What is that?" William's expression softened in a way that made him seem less like a billionaire and more like the exhausted father from booth 7 again. "A chance for me to return the favor." Naomi stared at the white envelope in William Whitmore's hand without moving. Rain drifted softly through the cold morning air while traffic slowed around the diner just to glimpse the line of black SUVs. Somewhere behind the glass windows, Rosie was definitely pretending to clean the same coffee cup for the 10th time. I cannot take money from you, Naomi said quietly. William shook his head immediately. It is not charity. Ethan smiled up at her beneath the umbrella. Dad practiced that sentence in the car. William exhaled through his nose, almost amused despite himself. Thank you, Ethan. Naomi felt herself relax slightly for the first time since arriving. The little boy had a way of making even billionaires seem ordinary. William extended the envelope again. Please. Naomi hesitated before finally taking it carefully. The paper felt heavier than it should have. She opened it slowly while rain tapped against the umbrella overhead. Inside sat several documents neatly clipped together. At the top of the first page, bold letters read, Chicago School of Nursing Scholarship Program. Naomi froze. Her eyes moved quickly down the page, then back up again like she thought she misunderstood the words. Full tuition coverage. Housing assistance. Transportation stipend. Her throat tightened instantly. What is this? She whispered. William watched her quietly. 3 years ago, you enrolled in nursing school. Naomi looked up sharply. How do you know that? Because after I left last night, I asked somebody to learn who you were. Naomi lowered the paper slowly. That sounds illegal. One of the security men nearby coughed awkwardly into his fist. Ethan burst into laughter. Even William smiled slightly this time. Probably. Naomi looked back down at the scholarship documents. Her fingers trembled faintly now. I had to leave after my mother got sick, she said softly. Bills got too expensive. William nodded once. You had excellent grades. Naomi swallowed hard. Nobody had spoken about that part of her life in years. The dreams she packed away quietly after funeral bills and rent notices became more urgent than anatomy textbooks. Why would you do this for me? She asked. William looked toward the rainy street for a long moment before answering. Because last night my son saw something I thought no longer existed. His voice stayed calm, but quieter now. More honest. Someone helping another person without wanting anything back. Naomi felt Ethan slip his small hand into hers suddenly. Warm. Trusting. Dad has been sad for a long time, Ethan whispered. William closed his eyes briefly like the words landed somewhere painful. Naomi looked between them silently. The expensive cars. The security team. The billion-dollar image. None of it seemed important standing there in the rain beside a tired father and his little boy. Last night was my wife's birthday, William said finally. She passed away 2 years ago. The morning noise around them faded strangely quiet again. Ethan wanted pancakes because she used to make them for him every birthday morning. His eyes lowered briefly toward his son. I drove around for hours trying to pretend I was holding everything together. Naomi's chest ached softly hearing it. William gave a faint, humorless smile. Then my credit cards locked after my assistant flagged suspicious activity, because apparently disappearing from your own security team at midnight creates problems. Ethan looked up proudly. Dad turned his phone off. Yes, William admitted quietly. I did. Naomi glanced down again at the scholarship papers while rain shimmered along the edges of the envelope. I only bought soup, she whispered. William's expression softened completely then. No, he said gently. You reminded my son that kindness still exists. Ethan squeezed her hand tighter. And Dad smiled this morning for the first time in forever. Naomi looked at the little boy standing beside her and suddenly had to blink hard, against unexpected tears. Then William reached into his coat pocket one more time and pulled out something small wrapped in tissue paper. There is one more thing. Naomi frowned slightly. What now? William carefully unfolded the paper. Inside rested a silver necklace with a tiny stethoscope charm hanging from it. Simple. Elegant. My wife bought this the day she finished nursing school, he said softly. I think she would want you to have it. Naomi stared at the silver necklace resting in William's hand while rain drifted softly through the cold Chicago morning. The tiny stethoscope charm caught the gray light like something fragile and important. For a moment, nobody spoke. Even the city noise around them seemed distant now. I cannot take something that belonged to your wife, Naomi whispered carefully. William looked down at the necklace for a second before answering. Claire believed nurses were the closest thing the world had to angels. His voice stayed calm, but Naomi could hear the grief underneath every word. She used to say hospitals survive because of women nobody notices enough. Ethan leaned closer to Naomi beneath the umbrella. Mom wore it every day. Naomi swallowed hard. The little boy said it so naturally, like he still expected his mother to walk through the door at any moment. William carefully folded Naomi's fingers around the necklace anyway. She would rather see it moving forward than sitting inside a safe somewhere. Naomi looked down at the charm resting against her palm. Cool silver. Surprisingly light. Yet somehow it felt heavier than anything she had held in years. Across the street, traffic moved slowly through rain, while people continued staring at the line of black SUVs outside the diner. Rosie finally burst through the front door, unable to contain herself anymore. Okay, I am officially clocking out emotionally because what is happening right now? Naomi laughed despite herself while William actually smiled this time. Rosie froze mid-step the second she recognized him completely. Oh my lord! She pointed at William with both hands. You are that billionaire guy from Forbes magazine. Ethan grinned proudly. See? I told you. He is famous. Rosie looked ready to faint. Baby, why did you not tell me you fed Batman last night? William blinked once. Batman? Naomi covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. One of the security guards turned away, clearly hiding a smile too. For the first time since arriving, the tension around the SUVs softened slightly. William glanced toward Rosie politely. Thank you for letting Naomi help us last night. Rosie immediately waved both hands. Oh no, sir. That was all her. I would have charged you extra for the fries. Ethan burst into laughter so loudly nearby pedestrians turned to look. Naomi shook her head, smiling softly. The sound of that little boy laughing felt strangely healing against the gray, rainy morning. Then William's expression grew serious again as he looked back toward Naomi. There is something else you should know. Naomi's smile faded slightly. What? William hesitated briefly. Last night was the first time Ethan has laughed in almost 8 months. Silence settled around them again. Ethan lowered his eyes shyly this time. William continued quietly. After Claire died, he stopped talking much. Stopped eating normally. Stopped sleeping. His gaze moved toward the diner windows. Most people around us became careful, polite, artificial. Naomi listened without interrupting. But last night, William said softly, you treated us like regular people. Naomi looked down at the necklace in her hand. You were regular people. William gave a faint, sad smile. You would be surprised how rare that feels when everyone knows your bank account before they know your name. Rain tapped gently against the umbrellas overhead while Naomi absorbed the weight of his words. Wealth looked glamorous from far away. But standing here now, William Whitmore mostly looked lonely. Ethan tugged lightly on Naomi's sleeve again. Dad told me something in the car. William immediately sighed. Ethan. He said Mom would have liked her. Naomi blinked softly. William looked genuinely embarrassed for the first time since she met him. Children have no respect for privacy. Rosie placed a dramatic hand over her heart. Oh, I am absolutely crying before breakfast. Naomi laughed quietly again, but something warm settled inside her chest this time, something she had not felt in years. Seen. Not because of pity, not because of charity, but because one small act of kindness had somehow reached people who desperately needed it. Then William looked at her carefully and asked the one question Naomi never expected to hear. If you accept the scholarship, when would you want to start nursing school again? 6 months later, the first snowfall of December drifted softly across downtown Chicago, while Naomi Carter stood in pale blue scrubs beneath the bright hospital lights of St. Mary's Medical Center. Her nursing badge rested against her chest beside the silver necklace William had given her that rainy morning outside the diner. She still touched the tiny stethoscope charm sometimes before difficult exams, like a quiet reminder that her life had changed because one night she chose kindness over fear. Nurse Carter? A patient called softly from down the hallway. Naomi turned immediately with the same calm warmth that once carried plates of soup through Rosie's diner. Coming. She moved through the hospital with quiet confidence now. Not rushed, not uncertain, purposeful, like somebody finally standing inside the life she was always meant to have. Her instructors noticed it too. The way patients relaxed around her. The way elderly people smiled when she adjusted blankets or sat beside them for an extra minute after long shifts. Naomi never talked much about where she came from. She never mentioned overdue rent notices or broken apartment elevators or the $10 bill that changed everything. Some stories felt too sacred once they survived. That evening, after finishing a 12-hour shift, Naomi stepped outside the hospital into softly falling snow and stopped immediately. A familiar black SUV waited quietly near the curb. Naomi laughed under her breath before the driver's door even opened. Ethan jumped out first wearing a navy winter coat and gloves too big for his hands. Naomi! He ran toward her through the snow with the same unstoppable energy that had slowly returned to him over the past few months. Naomi hugged him tightly while he nearly knocked her backward laughing. Look at you, she said smiling. You got taller. Dad says I am going to pass him one day. William stepped out beside the SUV, hands tucked into a dark wool coat, while snow settled lightly in his hair. He looked different now too. Still powerful. Still composed. But lighter somehow. Less haunted. That prediction terrifies me, he admitted dryly. Naomi smiled warmly at him. Good evening, Mr. Whitmore. William raised an eyebrow immediately. After 6 months. We are still doing that? She laughed softly. Sorry. Good evening, William. Ethan grabbed her hand excitedly. We brought something. William reached into the SUV and pulled out a small rectangular frame wrapped carefully in brown paper. Naomi frowned slightly. Another mysterious billionaire gift? This one is smaller, William said. Naomi unwrapped it slowly beneath the falling snow. Then her eyes widened softly. Inside the frame sat the original wrinkled $10 bill from that rainy diner night. Beneath it, engraved silver lettering read, the most valuable $10 we ever received. Naomi stared at it silently while snow drifted around them. I thought you already framed this, she whispered. William nodded. That one stays in my office. Ethan grinned proudly. Dad tells everybody the story now. Naomi laughed quietly through tears she could not quite hide anymore. That is embarrassing. No, William said gently. It reminds people what actually matters. For a moment the city noise faded beneath the snowfall. Cars moved slowly past glowing Christmas lights while Naomi looked between the father and son standing beside her. The lonely man from booth 7 was gone now. The silent little boy who barely smiled was gone too. And somehow, without realizing it, Naomi had changed with them. William glanced toward the hospital entrance. How was your first week officially working as a nurse? Naomi looked down at the framed $10 bill one more time before answering softly. Hard. Then she smiled. Exactly the way dreams are supposed to feel. Ethan squeezed her hand tightly. Snow settled across the quiet Chicago street while the three of them stood together beneath the glowing hospital lights. And somewhere deep inside Naomi finally understood something life had tried teaching her all along. The world changes loudly sometimes, but the moments that save people, those usually happen in silence.